Hey there, I'm Ceci, and I'm a front-end and UX engineer at 64 Robots. And I'm here today to talk about accessibility and the different interfaces that our code generates. So the not gonna discuss like very technical things about how to make your websites accessible, because that's beyond the scope of this talk, though we are going to discuss some of those things. But what I'm going to try to do is help you build self-awareness over the code you write. And some of the things I'm going to say you might know, but I think listening to things in a certain way sometimes can help us interiorize them better. So let's get to it. The roadmap for this talk is going to be the following. First, we are going to talk about what is accessibility and why should we care. After that, we're going to discuss what is an interface. Then we're going to talk about the accessibility tree. And to finish, we're going to talk about some considerations we should take when building single-page applications as the ones we build with Vue. So what is accessibility and why do we need it? So according to the W3C Web Accessibility Initiative, which are the ones that build the spec for accessibility, which are the WCAG 2.0 guidelines, the web is fundamentally designed to work for all people, regardless their hardware, software, location, language, or ability. So this means, among other things, that when the web meets this goal, it is accessible for people with a diverse range of hearing, movement, sight, and cognitive ability. This means that everyone can perceive, understand, and navigate the web, interact with the web, and contribute to the web. It sounds easy, but so why should we care about accessibility? Well, there are three main sets of reasons. I would divide them this way, like moral reasons, legal reasons, and business reasons. So the first moral reason, I would say that it's just the right thing to do, and it's our job as engineers. You know, any other engineer that builds a public service, like an architect or a civil engineer, must have an accessibility plan, so should we. Another moral reason is that it can happen to anyone at any point. And it can be temporary or it can be permanent. Like you can be born deaf, or you can just age and lose sight, or you can have an injury. You can be holding a baby and you can benefit from being able to navigate the web with just a keyboard. Another reason is that there's a huge segment of population that lives with functional diversity. 16% of the world's population is a lot of people. And I think in the next decades, we're going to see how this gets more and more important, because we digital borns are not getting any younger. So we have a segment of people right now, that of older people that may not be using the web as much, but we are going to need to use it. I think I saw once that only 2% of the French websites are accessible. That is a very low number, and I don't think France is an exception. So as we can see, this is going to get very, very important in the future. So the legal reasons, let's talk about the legal reasons. So the current legislations tend to follow the WCAG guidelines. And we are going to see how this moves towards being a human right rather than just an accommodation. We have some examples of interesting lawsuits, especially in the US. In the last years, there are some famous lawsuits like the Netflix one, Target, Domino's. But I think the most interesting one is the one against Wet Willis, which is, for those who doesn't know it, is restaurant and cocktails chain. And this trial set a legal ground to hold developers accountable for accessibility issues, and software companies too, instead of just the owners of these websites. So there's that. So let's move to business reasons. So the first one is that Google rewards good UX, and good UX means good accessibility. In general, Google has made it very clear that a better user experience ranks better on search. And also, when we think about accessibility, we are doing user advocacy, which is always a good thing to do. And accessibility is something that, thinking about it, benefits everyone. We have plenty of examples of things that were designed and built for people with functional diversity that benefit everyone. The internet itself, here we have a picture of Vinton Cerf, which is one of the fathers of the internet, and he's deaf, and he needed to communicate with his colleagues through documents because he couldn't do it by the phone. So this was one of the main motivations to build that first network, like IP-based network in 1981, that is now the internet. Similar things happen with the SMS and with the phone itself. Another business reason is that good accessibility translates into cleaner code. It ensures the durability of our code because our legacy code will age better, and it's really very much cheaper to implement during early stages. And of course, as we discussed before, we include more segments of population. So we talk a lot about interfaces in our job, but what is an interface? We can say in general that an interface is a device or system that unrelated entities use to interact. So according to this definition, we can say that your washing machine panel is an interface between your washing machine and you, that Google's website is an interface between you and Google's search engine, that Siri is a spoken interface, an API is an interface between two applications, as we know, and we can even say that a language is an interface between two people. So as web developers, we are very used to think about different viewport sizes, different devices in which our visual interface is going to be rendered. Like, I think that's part of the beauty of our job. Like, you can, our visual interface renders in 300 pixels screens to as big as a screen can get. But the thing is that whether we know it or not, whether we pay attention to it or not, we are actually developing two interfaces, that a visual one and a spoken one. So we are very used to the old well-known DOM, but we have another tree parallel to the DOM, that is the accessibility tree. So let's talk a bit about this accessibility tree. The accessibility tree is a parallel structure to the DOM that generates from the DOM. And each browser will generate a different version of it based on the accessibility API and their own source code. And it will give assistive technologies a simplified version of it. That is the one that we just saw. This accessibility tree includes information about the role, the name, the state of a node, and the relationships between nodes. So we are actually, with this visual interface that we are creating is actually a semantic interface, that because it needs to be spoken. So that is why semantic HTML and also functional HTML are so important. Here we have an example of a button, for example. That is something that we usually see, that people use divs instead of buttons. So a div, a button is a semantic HTML tag, but it's also a functional HTML tag. So I just want you to see how much code you have to write to make a div be an accessible button. Because first of all, you have to give it a tab index, because a div is not a focusable element by default. You have to give it a role, so the accessibility tree knows that that node is a button. And you have to give it three events with the same method, because when we add to a native HTML button a click event, that same method that we added, the browser will perform what is called as click synthetic activation, and it will add that same method to the enter key and to spacebar key as well. So see how much more it takes to build a div, a button from a div, than just using a button. So I encourage you to look into it if you don't know about it, and use semantic HTML and as much native tags as you can, like tags that are supposed to have a specific function, let's say. So as far as accessibility APIs go, we have these connections between them. First, the accessibility tree is in the middle of the DOM and the accessibility API, and it communicates back and forth with them. And the accessibility API is the one that is in charge of communicating with assistive technologies, usually screen readers, which I really recommend you to get used to. If you have a Mac, it comes with the operating system. And I also recommend you to start navigating the web with just a keyboard and see where your focus goes. So where can we find this accessibility tree? Because we all know where to find the DOM, but maybe we haven't heard of this accessibility tree in our lives. So in Chrome, we can find it under the Elements tab, and in the level of the same level as the styles and layout and everything, you can find an accessibility tab. And as you can see, you see here the role of this heading. I think this is Twitter, if there's an area label or not, and a lot of information. And in Firefox, it has its own first level tab. So let's talk a bit about some specific things that happen with accessibility in single page applications. So there are many things to do. This is a rabbit hole, as everything in programming, but I'm going to talk about 3 considerations that I think we should always have when building Vue applications. That is focus management and scroll position, asynchronous reading of content, and page titles. So focus management. The thing is that in traditional applications, the browser has native behavior to handle focus and scrolling position when we navigate through pages or in the same page. And so when we are using Vue, or when we are building single page applications, that navigation is handled by JS. The Vue router is manipulating the DOM and the history API. So we should choose a strategy. It doesn't have to be the same strategy as browsers do, but we have to choose one. It can be either when we change routes, we move the focus to the top of the page, or if we change routes, we first store where the focus was, what was the active element. This is very easy to do with document.activeElement. And you can store it, and then when you go back, bring focus to that element again. But you can choose wherever you want, but that it's just something to consider, that when we are building single page applications, the focus might be nowhere. So then this is a nice one. Asynchronous reading of content, because we all know the benefits of virtual DOM, especially for performance, but it has some issues with assistive technologies. This might change in the future, but for now we have to deal with this manually. The thing is that the accessibility tree doesn't change unless there's a page reload. So with the new asynchronous content that we put into a DOM, the accessibility tree doesn't know about it. So there's a very nice feature and easy to use for this that is called ARIA Live Regions. If you don't know what ARIA is, it's short for Accessible Rich Internet Applications, and it's kind of a set of custom HTML elements that Google has developed to make the web more accessible and the web more semantic, especially before HTML5. There's a very nice set of attributes there that we can take advantage of. And live regions are just the best, because a case use of this could be, for example, when you're building a form and you have validation messages. Those validation messages won't show up to that spoken interface. So what ARIA Live Regions let us do is append a node to the accessibility tree, and we can do it politely and wait until the content has finished reading, or we can do it immediately if it's important enough. So yeah, that's a very easy solution, and I encourage you a lot to look into it. Then there are many cases where you will need it. So page titles. The thing is that screen readers, the first thing they read out loud are page titles. But in single page applications, we don't change the page title unless we make it. So if you're using just Vue, you can do some workarounds and use maybe a Mixiner plugin to change page titles, change the title property of the document object. And if you're using Nuxt, you can just use the head method on each page. So that's it. I hope you learned something. I thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the Q&A.
And
hello.
2, 3. Oh my God.
Well done, that was amazing.
Slamming.
Thank you.
Accessibility is so important because it's also like, celiac disease. When you go to restaurants, right, and I need gluten-free food, and I know the restaurant says, so we've got to make gluten-free food for one person. It's like, yeah, I deserve to eat the same as everyone else, right? So accessibility, it's the same thing as food. We need to make it accessible for everyone. So well done, great job.
That was a fantastic
Thank
piece
you.
right there.
It's true, right?
So, no, absolutely.
And actually, I'll tell you something else. I was in France at another conference, and I got the privilege to have a chat with a blind developer. He's a developer. His job, he went out on stage to give a talk about accessibility. It's really important. There are people out there, and we need to make the world more accessible for them. So, yeah, well done.
For sure.
No, that
Thank
was a
you.
fantastic talk. I mean, I had a quick question for you. I know this is probably something that you'd probably get in the sessions, but what drove you to get into accessibility?
It's just, I think I've been in social movements for a long time, and I'm a queer person. And I think, it makes you sensitive to some things. And also my mother is a person that needs accessible, maybe not websites, but infrastructures. So I have to think about it from time to time.
Great job. We need more people like you.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's I've grown to sort of appreciate accessibility and certain areas of it too, and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get into the details because it's not about me. It's about you going into this session and answering some more, detailed queries and whatnot. So what we're going to do is.
And I just want to say, I just loved how she saw that I did my washing, so she put in her talk about washing machines.
All right,
thought it was great.
there we go. You know what I'm saying? Great minds think alike, apparently.
I knew what you were gonna do.
You knew it.
Hey, there you go. It's next frame we're going to have detergent in the background. So
They're going to be dry for the next one. I'll be taking them down.
Exactly. But we definitely want to
This is marketing.
Exactly, right? Next sponsor is Tide. But speaking of sponsors, actually, we definitely want to give a big shout out to the good people at Ionic.